and blessings, family, and welcome to another edition of What is the Time, a podcast about personal sovereignty, living where the getting is good, and celestial timing. Thank you so much for being here for another time, and a special shout out to all the buckaroonies who might have came through today. I super appreciate all y'all for being here too. Thank you so much to the fam. If you want to support this kind of content in the future, if you like what I do, if you want to get an astrology reading, if you want to get an electional report where you can help to time your life, your product launches, your first dates, these kinds of things, important emails, all that type of stuff, you can find me on patreon.com/ZamboniFunk. You can go to ZamboniFunk.com where you can book a reading, where you can look at the music, you can check the other podcast episodes out. There's a lot of stuff that I do here, and there are many ways for you to support and just check it out. Send it to your friends and all this. Today on the show, I am delighted to have my man. I don't even know how to introduce you. Should I call you Cameron? Should I call you Venus? What's the
Whatever's
deal?
Fine with me. A lot of people seem to think my first name is Venus, which is always funny. Like, not sure if they totally understand that, like, Cameron is my name. Like, some people, I'm pretty sure, are legit convinced I am named Venus.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to call you Venus if you like.
I don't care.
Whatever.
Yeah, Cameron's fine.
All right, cool. Well, my man Cameron from Venus Theory is here today. He is a YouTuber and a sound designer and a musician and makes a bunch of really interesting stuff and is something of a thought leader as far as when we think about the future of arts and creation and music in general. And he's somebody who also, not for nothing, has the best radio voice in all of YouTube. I appreciate him so much. Thank you so much for being here, Cameron.
Thanks for having me.
To have you. So let's talk for a second. Like, what is Venus Theory about here? Like, that's a very interesting name for someone doing what you do. I've noticed that there's like a lot of astrological terminology that you use. You've got an ephemeris sound pack as well.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of that's also just like half kitsch, where it's like, it's Venus Theory, so it's got to be like spacey something or other, Mm-hmm. Yeah, the name originally came from, like, I was starting like a new project it was originally my wife and I, and we were like trying to come up with a name for the whole thing, and I was like, it's got to be something for like an electronic group and something like that. And of course she was like, Unicorn Space Rainbow, something like that. So I don't know how I landed on it, but it was like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. So that was kind of like the initial thought. But then there was this video I watched when I was, I don't know, like junior high, and it was just like, do you remember early YouTube, where early YouTube was just purely weird videos?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was one of those.
Little like Newgrounds.
Yeah, it was. I don't remember what the video was getting at, but it was something about like Mercury is like the early formation of the Earth, and Venus was after it started to form like an atmosphere and something, and then it got to like the Earth is where we are now, and then Mars is the Earth after like a nuclear war or something. So it was this weird like, quantum tunneling time weird theory. I don't know. So then it was like Venus Theory kind of became like the name of the whole thing. And then ever since then, yeah, it was just like, got to stick with it and keep things on brand, I guess,
Sure. Yeah, well, it's so interesting because like Venus, of course, is associated with music and
Mm-hmm.
with things that are enjoyable and harmony and these kinds of things. But really, in like paying attention to what you do, I feel like Saturn is way more your vibe.
No, Saturn is for sure.
Dude.
But it's funny because like, Venus being, kind of like the muse and stuff like that. I feel like it's funny because like I picked this name, but it does work on like so many levels, but only in like hindsight now.
Right.
Of like,
Indeed.
at
Names
first I
are
was
often
like, it
this
just
way.
sounded cool.
Sure. Yeah,
But it was like, it was one of those things where like when I had that name like pop into my brain, it just felt right,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's a lot of the things to a lot of the process is just like there's that initial gut reaction you have to things, and you have to like listen to that. And I feel like that's been very helpful for me.
Right.
Not questioning stuff. Like if it just feels like it's the thing to do, then just whatever, like I'll figure it out later.
For sure. And that's like a central theme in a lot of your YouTube content. So you've got like sort of two arms of your YouTube content. You've got like gear reviews and this sort of like, here's how to use this particular gear, or
Right.
here's a
Yeah.
new sample pack I made, and this kind of stuff like that. And so that's like for music creators, it gets real sort of techie as far as like the music stuff is concerned, how to generate music. And then there's this other arm of your content which is much more sort of philosophically based. There's
Mhm.
like this the concept of idea generation and what art even and how do we get art out into the world, how do you
Right.
actually finish your art, and these kinds of things. And one of your really central themes has been like, take the first thing that comes out of you and use that thing. Start there. There's a good chance that that gut impulse is the first, like whatever your first move is, there's a good chance that that is going to be one of your strongest ideas. And so
Yeah.
start there. And like, there's a lot of, I've heard you talk a lot about simplicity and limitations and doing less about things. This is one of the reasons why I really like Saturn for you, not only because you
Yeah.
always wear black and gray and
Right. Yeah. I wore a green shirt a couple days ago, believe it or not. I felt like that was
what
illegal. Yeah. My
right.
mom, or yeah, it was my mom. My mom sent me some new T-shirts or something for. I went out to her house for Thanksgiving, and I had this T-shirt on that was like too small. So my mom immediately like shipped me new T-shirts that were a bigger size, just because they
That's
were
what's
like
up.
old
Thanks,
shirts.
mom.
But they were like, gray and green and whatever. And then it was like, I don't know, it was like laundry day or something. So all I had was like this army green shirt, and I put it on, and I was like, this just immediately feels wrong. Like I've been wearing this like same black, and I have like 4 packs of this exact black V-neck. And I've
Sure.
been wearing these for forever now. So it was like putting on a green shirt was just like, this is like, I didn't know what to do with my hands. It was all just wrong.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And a
Right.
black shirt does the damn thing every time. But so it's so it one of the things that I have really leaned into as well around music production is like, so Saturn, for example, I'm an astrologer, so I'm going to go down this
Yeah.
path here. And you, a few times in your videos, you've talked about how like
I'm
not
vaguely familiar. I'm like,
woo-woo
I
that
get
you
most
are.
of it, but it's more my wife's thing. She knows
Sure.
like way more about it than I do. I'm vaguely aware of most of like the big concepts though.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job, just like really, really hitting the Saturn things and showing us the value of Saturn. So one of the, so Saturn is known as being grumpy,
Right.
and annoying and difficult
The
challenges,
teacher.
obstacles, right? And not an easy teacher. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like the kind of teacher that will show you where you fucked up all the time. Jupiter is also a teacher, and Jupiter wants to cultivate. Jupiter's like, yeah, do more of that.
Yeah.
Jupiter's job is to confirm and this kind of thing, right? Saturn's like, nope, you fucked up. You shouldn't have did that. Now you have to deal with the consequences of that, right? And but Saturn, so because Saturn is so difficult, a lot of times we don't spend the time maybe like being grateful for Saturn, for the lessons that Saturn does ultimately teach us. And so I like to spend time with that. And I think a lot about Saturn as being really good for building blocks, like for
Mm,
really building a strong foundation, and also being really good with limitations and boundaries, saying no to stuff. Saying no to stuff is a very important part of the process of creation in general, right?
right.
And so would you just talk a little bit about what your strategy is, like if like when you're trying to build a product, when you're trying to make something cool, or if you're trying to, let's say that you have been watching a YouTube video or something like that, and after you get done, you are inspired to make something awesome.
Right.
Then
Yeah.
like where do you go from there?
I mean, I think for me, it's like, when you see a musician performing or something and you're like, oh, that was super, super cool. I want to do that or whatever. It's kind of that moment of understanding like what version of that do I want to do? Where it's like, I'll see ideas and it's always like easy to imitate an idea.
Hmm.
If I hear the new Skrillex album or something, all of a sudden I want to make like some dark dubstep or like kind of, some more like interesting stuff and play more with like sound design or whatever. But then it's like I just end up making another like shitty Skrillex knockoff, right? So it's, for me, it's like when I get an idea, it's like, what about this idea do I like? And just breaking it down to sort of those fundamental components of like what's happening and what about this like speaks to me. And then what am I going to do to like iterate on that, you know, in my direction? Because that's where you start to find the more interesting ideas, because I think it's equal parts experimentation as it is like self-discovery. We're like, and that's why I think there's so much value, you know, speaking more on like music, I guess specifically, in having a very broad musical taste. You know, if you're listening to some super weird, like ambient experimental stuff all the time, that's great and all, but you might find some really interesting ideas in like Balkan folk music, where, you know, there's a weird scale or like a way of doing melody or approaching chords differently, or, you know, looking at like classical music and like how do chord voicings work, and like voice leading, and how are they utilizing the restrictions that they have. You know, if you've only got 3 viola players, how do you write a really nice melodic part with only 3 notes at a time available? You know, because most of the time, like, they're not, unless they're playing double stops, but like most of the time, you know, a viola player or whatever, just 1 note at a time. So if we've got 3 of those, what turns that into a convincing piece of music? So you can take those ideas and say, you know, I like this chord progression. You know, it became like I heard this song in a bar, and then, wow, that was a really neat chord progression. So I'll Shazam it, or whatever the hell kids do now. Go home, pull up that song, dissect it, figure out what I'm liking about it, and then, you know, take something away from it. Maybe I'll use that exact chord progression, or maybe I'll use it as like a segment in a chord progression I write, or I'll just take that as like a melodic concept and say like, wow, when they did this to this, that was a really like profound feeling. That might be a really great way to introduce like a theme song I'm working on for like a score or something, you know, like a central thing. But that's pretty much the main idea for me, is like when I see something that inspires me, I have to just break it down into little tiny pieces and figure out like, what am I picking and choosing? And then what am I putting that on top of? You know, those are kind of like, those are the paints, but they're not the canvas. Right.
Sure. Yeah, so what I'm hearing there is like it's very important, like the analysis of whatever's coming in is important. Not only like, so if you're inspired by a thing, then you're looking at that thing and then you go, well, what is inspiring me about this? What is happening here that is so exciting to me? And maybe I can do something that I can use that move later. So I don't have to recreate that piece, but I can do those moves later. Is that a good way to?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. And I think, you know, my wife can attest that I'm a chronic overthinker. So
Sure.
like everything I do is very much like analytical and like analysis driven, where I have to understand something before I'm willing to like do it. Which I've always been that way. Like when I was a kid, when I would buy like, you know, a video game or something, I was the kid that would read the manual first before I would even put the game in the PlayStation. I had to like understand what was happening and why. And then, you know, and I'm the same even now, like musically, when I have an idea, I have to just break it down in my head of like, what am I approaching here with this, and how am I going to do it, and what am I going to use to do it, you know? But then too, it's like, that's also a good way to do things, I think, at least for my approach. You know, more other people are a lot more creative than I am. I'm just very like picky with things, and I have to like pull things apart and then implement them. But for me, it's like when I pick things apart like that, it's also nice because then it also lets me kind of get a higher level view on like the holes in something. You know, what am I missing, or what's like an alternative thing I could consider here, or like in knowing that these are the expected things, what are the unexpected ideas here? You know, what are the dark horses of weird things I could try in something? And I think that's really useful, at least for me, because then it's like I can kind of pull all of that together and then push it all into like the final product. Or if I'm working on, you know, the core ideas and I get stuck because I'm trying to work on just a level of understanding what each thing is doing and the purpose that it's serving, that way, you know, I can look into those weirder ideas and pull from that to start breaking out of like when I get bored of an idea, you know, because I feel like that's most of the process. The first 30 minutes of writing a song are super, super fun. The next like 8 hours suck, because it's like, you know, you get that loop going and you're like, yeah, this fucks. This is great. Oh man, I love the drums here. This is so cool. Now what? you
Mhm.
know, so you copy and paste, you maybe move some things and you're like, this kind of sucks.
Sure.
You know, and then you got to go through and like start building again. So if you kind of break things apart like that, it's a nice way to look and be like, okay, so what is like the weirdest turn I could take after this point? Or like, what's a new idea
Mm.
I could introduce on top of this? And that's where that instinct, I think, comes in a lot of the time where, you know, you listen to a loop over and over, and every once in a while you catch that like flash of like a melody in your head. Or like you
Mm.
hear something in your head that's like, oh, you know, that would go over the top of this part, or you hear like a different drum groove or something. And the
Mhm.
faster you lay that down, even if it's like a bad version of it, the faster you can start progressing and building on something, which is like, I feel like that's the thing I have to tell people all the time is like, arranging vertically is great, but that's not a song. You know,
Hmm.
like you can layer and do all sorts of cool stuff, but an 8-bar loop is an 8-bar loop. You know, it's the horizontal that's the progress. At least, you know,
Hmm.
if you're doing like linear music, you know, A to B or whatever. If you're doing generative stuff or something, then obviously that's a whole other ballpark. But
Sure. So what's a song?
I don't know. That's something I've actually been experimenting with a bit. One of the projects I've always wanted to do, I'm just not smart enough to figure it out, is like I really enjoyed generative stuff and like algorithmic music, and I think that's really interesting.
Mhm.
And I thought it would be fun to do some kind of like VR album where it's like a VR environment and every level is like the song, so to speak, but it's
Hmm.
not because I mean that is music in like the traditional sense is it's very much linear. It starts and it ends, and there's stuff that happens in the middle, and it happens the same way every time. And especially in recorded music, like if an artist released an album, that's it. You know, they don't update it later on. It's not like
Hmm.
you get, you know,
Mhm.
album version whatever, which is something Ben Jordan is experimenting with right now, I know, and I thought that was an interesting idea. But I thought it would be interesting to do like a VR thing that's a at least semi-generative experience where the way you interact in that environment, like, you know, you lift the square and suddenly there's more chords, and if you push the bubbles away from you every time the bubble bounces, that's a melodic note that's tuned to the chord, you know, something like that. So each level is the song, but it only exists as long as you're in it, and it only exists in the way that you make it exist. Because I really love the idea of like impermanence. I think that's such a
Hmm.
fascinating concept, especially when it comes to like art, you know, where the like the whole thing in Buddhism, you know, the sand gardens and whatever. And I think that's so interesting to do that, or the mandalas or whatever, where they do these crazy sand paintings and then just wipe it off.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's, you know, and I get that that's an exercise in like humility and like appreciation, but I think it's an interesting idea with music too. And I wonder if there's a better way to explore that, you know, where it's like
Hmm.
there are these components that represent a thing, but they only represent them if you make them do that. And I thought that that would
Tell me
just be
more
a
about that.
really interesting take on an album. How you would do that, I don't exactly know, but I feel like
Mhm.
that would be a cool idea.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I've never heard anybody talking about that before, and I I am so very interested in that. That's one of the things that like I have now released 2 songs, right? Nothing like, like a lot of folks be putting out albums and all
Yeah.
this. Like I have not had that kind of capacity. But the 2 songs that I've put out, I'm very proud of. And the first one is like that it took like 11 years to make that joint, and
Right.
there's like all the stuff, and it like took everything that I could do, and all this money and all this, right? And then now you put it on and it lasts for 4 minutes,
Yep.
and then it's done. And
And we've reached
like,
a read like a weird peak in music with that too, where, you know, and kind of like you said though, every song you make though, it takes as long as you've been making music. There was a thing with, I think it was like
mm,
maybe it was Van Gogh or Picasso or something. I remember reading it in a book where it was a story of there's a famous artist at a cafe. I think it was Van Gogh or Picasso. I don't really remember offhand, but they're sketching on a napkin, and this lady walks up and says, "I want that napkin from you. You know, what can I pay you for it?" And he says, "It's priceless." And she says, "Well, it only took you 5 minutes to draw before you were just going to throw it away." And he said, "No, it took me, you know, 60 years to draw this
Mm-hmm.
picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a lot of it. And it's funny because as artists, we work so hard to actualize these ideas and concepts. And yeah, we spend all this time and money and blood, sweat, and tears to make 4 minutes of something or whatever for
Mm-hmm.
it to be swiped by in like a Spotify playlist while someone's taking a dump at a Wendy's, you know.
For sure.
And it's funny that that's where music exists anymore, because it's like it's hard to appreciate that as an artist, because it's like I remember, you know, as a kid, as a teenager and whatever, putting on an album, you know, putting on headphones, and like that was the world. That was all I would experience in that moment, was the album start to finish, listening to like every detail. And then, you know, I would see my sister or my stepbrother or whoever, like they, you know, they'd be putting on music, like cleaning their room and whatever. And it's like, you're not like experiencing it though, but it's like, that is the way most people experience music, which is kind of funny, which is why I thought that like that VR thing might be an interesting twist on it, just because it's like
Mm.
it's equally passive as it is active. And I think that's an interesting like intersect in the idea of like what music represents. Is it an activity? Is it something you consciously, you know, take part in?
Mm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't know, maybe that would
That's
just be an interesting experiment.
for sure. Oh yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. That's super super interesting because the second piece that I made is also a breath exercise. So you can just put it on and listen to the music, and I think that the music is dope. But it's also a breathwork exercise. So it's got a use case. You can put it on and
Hmm.
interact with the music, and part of the reason why I did that was because I was like you, where I get a little bit offended sometimes when people aren't listening to the music or when people aren't paying attention, and not just my records, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the shit that I love, and people are like clearly just not, they're scrolling on their phone or
Well,
like
it's like when
whatever
you
it
go to
is.
a bar and there's like a musician on stage, you know, pouring their heart out, playing the
Mhm.
songs, playing the covers, and then they're like, and here's my original tune, and everybody just completely tunes out. And it's like, this
Totally.
sucks.
Right, right. Yeah, and so I regularly get offended by that. And so I made a piece of music that incorporates like your attention into it. So it's like
Mhm.
this idea of like pay it just, and the idea of the whole thing is to be still for a little while, for about 20 minutes. You just like hang out and breathe and be easy and all this, right? And so that gives you an opportunity to listen to the music. And so it's interesting to hear you talking about your VR generated music thing here as well, because it's so similar to that. And I hadn't planned to go down that route, but where that sort of like leads me to here is, so we're in this place where you're, you know, like scrolling in the Wendy's bathroom or whatever. And so, and and everybody out here has made so much more music that's way doper than whatever you made, and that is way better promoted, and the album artwork is cooler, and it's been distributed more effectively, et cetera, et cetera. So now, as people who are, I don't know, independent creators, or people who are just kind of like regular people who are trying to make the world more beautiful and more valuable in our regular lives, how can we think about value and what our own arts and creation have, like what value those things have, as well as like those concepts kind of generally?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, for me, it's always coming down to just the idea of like enjoying the process. And then after the process is over, it's kind of irrelevant, you know, because
Mm.
you know, and I don't even release a bunch of my own music anymore because I just never have time. And like all the music I make is like part of a other effort, you know, a scoring thing or whatever, or, you know, demos for products or whatever. But I think it just has to be the fulfillment of it coming from the process itself. Like if you enjoy making the music and other people happen to enjoy it too, that's as far as it's ever going to get most of the time.
Mm.
And if you're not happy with that, like you're never going to be super happy with it, because even if you are chasing, you know, the more traditional model of success or whatever, it's, I don't know, it's like a lot of things. Like, you know, my YouTube channel would be a good example. When I first started posting videos, you know, I would get 50 views. Wow. Like no one
Mhm.
cares. And then now it reaches a point where it's like, if I get less than like 10,000 views on the first day, I hate myself, because it's like, that's not good enough. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if you look at success as like being heard, being seen, and whatever, all that's really seeking is external validation. And that's never going to be enough, because first it's going to be like, I just want an audience, right? You want 100 plays. And if you get 100 plays on SoundCloud on like your first 5 tracks or so, you're just like, that's so cool. People love what I'm doing, and you get a couple comments. Hey man, I love the drop here. Or like, damn girl, this mix is clean. You get stuff like that, and it's this feedback loop that starts, and that feedback loop gets exponentially more dangerous because suddenly 100 plays isn't good when your buddy got 15,000 on his because it got picked up by some YouTube promoter mix thing, or got put on the Spotify new release radar, right? So now the bar very much shifts. So then you work at it, and then say you get 15,000 plays, and suddenly you're feeling like, all badass and whatever. But then you look again, and you're just, little fish in a very big pond. Someone else has got 1 million plays, and so on. So those numbers just never get any better. And once you hit those numbers, there's always a bigger number, right? And I think it just sucks so much joy out of the process. So then at the end of it, you're kind of at this point where you're looking at, and I think this is where a lot of artists have gone. This is a video I've been working on for a while now, and just like the research to it has just been a nightmare. But it's this idea that like after a while you become a producer, and that you are literally someone who produces music for the sake of like the algorithm and being playlist friendly. And I very much agree with this sentiment that there's this new era of like Spotify pop, and especially like TikTok pop. It's songs with these little 30-second hooks that edit down beautifully into a video. And on Spotify, it's the same lo-fi jazz bullshit that's been done to death 1 million times, because it will get featured. And it sucks because then you listen to the, the lo-fi jazz bullshit, and there's some great artists in there. Like people doing really cool things, but you can't help but think that like, are you holding something back though? And a lot of the conversations I've had with people that make, hard electronic music and lo-fi hip hop especially, a lot of them do very much work in like a formulaic fashion. And I don't really think there's anything wrong with that. Because I mean, I do a lot of the same stuff, especially in like scoring work, like sound beds and stuff need like intro, A section, quiet section, B section, outro. Like I write the same song 1 million times a day. But yeah, it's weird that after a while, whether you intentionally do it or not, you just become this like producer. You're just making a product to fulfill a need of something. It's feeding this machine. And I feel like a lot of the artists I know that do that end up just being super miserable. Like they just get depressed, and they get so obsessed with like the analytics and the streaming and whatever. And I get it, because we all want to be like, Nickelback or something. Like, that would be awesome to have like millions of adoring fans or whatever. But, there's one Katy Perry, and that's not your job. Right. And say the same thing. There's one Hannah Montana, and it ain't you. So the fulfillment just has to come from the process, and I think for me, a lot of the times, like writing and stuff is a very like meditative experience. And I think that's also why I personally really like hardware stuff is, it gets me up. It's an active thing, and it's plugging things in, and it's this slow, deliberate means to an end. And it's very focused and interesting. And it takes me out of all the stress of all the work and all the stuff to just make music again. And then, I put it out or I don't, and that's fine. I don't really care anymore. Because I did that for a long time. Was like I was in bands, I went on tours, I was on labels, I did all that stuff, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Not that these bands ever like super blew up, but a few of them, like we did festivals and a couple like regional tours, a couple like bigger tours, and supported such and such whoever was coming to town, and that was fine. But just like, God, it just feels like this sing dance monkey thing over and over and over. And it's just work. I don't know. Like it's not fun anymore. And some people love playing live. I don't.
Mm.
But again,
Oh,
it's all
really?
about that
Mm.
process for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have to enjoy that, and I think that's the best way as an independent creator to like stay sane, because otherwise you're just chasing something that's extraordinarily fleeting. You know, it's that dopamine rush that like so and so hit you back on Facebook or whatever, you know. It's that rush of, oh my god, so and so retweeted me, and that's such a hollow way to look at what you're doing.
Hmm. Yes. Yes,
Because
indeed.
then you,
Okay.
like I said, whether you consciously recognize it or not, after a certain point, I feel like that's where it all ends if that's the path you're chasing, is you're just throwing it out there hoping it sticks. And when it does,
Mm.
that's the only way you feel like you get a return on that investment. Because I think like many of the most talented artists who make some of the most interesting music I've heard, you've never heard of, and you probably never will. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's why like I
Mm-hmm.
love every once in a while when I do those like viewer track streams on my channel. I love those because it's just the most bizarre stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
you could tell it's people just making music because they love making music. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, when they get that feedback in the chat or whatever, or, you know, like I've had people clip my reactions to their songs just because they're so happy to see that someone enjoyed it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where that transaction has to end. You know, if you make something and you enjoyed making it and you put it out and other people enjoy it too, that's the end of it. You know, you're bringing something into someone's life. You're bringing value on some level. And whether that's like one person or 10 people or a million people, I'm not sure it really matters.
Hmm.
Like,
Well,
of
there's
course,
kind
there's
of a
a want.
continuum there, right?
Yeah.
Like if you played your tune for me and I was like, "Oh, that's super dope," then that makes you feel great, right?
Right.
And then if you play it to a room of 15 of us and I don't know, 10 of us are like, "Oh, that's super dope," then that's going to make you feel really good, right?
Right.
And it's the same scale that goes all the way to 12 million or
And that's the thing is
like
like, but then you end up looking at the wrong side of the equation. You're looking at the numbers rather than like, wow, I have added value to this person's day and
mm,
existence. And I think that's
mm,
pretty cool, you know? And,
interesting.
and of course, like everyone wants monetary success from music. We all do, but you know, statistically speaking, it will not happen. And
Mm,
especially in this day and age, it's harder than ever to break into it. But you know, I think there's ways to make it happen, but you have to be willing to compromise and understand that it is not what you think it is. You know, it's
mm,
not just I wake up at noon and write these awesome songs and I put them on SoundCloud and then I go to the bank and get bags of cash. Like that is not.
sure.
But and I think I've talked about that in videos too a couple times of like that's the side that we see because that's the
Mm-hmm,
side that's designed for us to be seen.
mm-hmm,
You know, I think whoever you are, Little Pump or Rihanna or whoever the hell, like there's still a bunch of bullshit that goes on behind the scenes. There's meetings and, you know, there's figuring out the finances of making a tour happen and all this stuff. And it sucks and it's a grind and it sucks so much of the joy out of the whole thing because then it is your job. And I think most
mm-hmm,
people severely overestimate their ability to handle that. Of like, if your hobby truly became your career, like you think you're okay with that because it's like now
mm-hmm,
music goes from something I do for fun to like the difference between paying my bills or not.
mm-hmm,
And that's, you
mm-hmm.
know, imagine having that kind of pressure on it. And it's just it's so hard to get that through to people that it's okay if you don't do that. Like
Mm,
it would be
mhm,
great to pay all your bills and do all this stuff with your music. I'm sure it would be fun, but it's fine if you don't. And it's I don't know why it's so hard for people to admit that to themselves, but I think it's
mm,
because maybe it's just, you know, we're bored of our careers or whatever and we just want to go for it and that's fine, but it's just so much more than a lot of people understand that it is because it is, you know, the music business. And there's just
mhm.
endless meetings and emails and setups and scheduling and da 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 da. Da. And when you do that, and even of like the full time, you know, traditional musicians that I know, music is the smallest part of their day.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of them
I've
are also equally miserable, especially now, like after COVID and whatever, like all the venues shut down. So all my friends who are in like
mhm,
touring bands and whatever are really, really struggling.
mhm,
And it's
mhm,
funny because it's like on paper they have what we all want. You know, they make their full time income playing shows and touring the country and whatever.
Hmm.
On paper that sounds really nice, but like, talking to them and knowing what they go through with a lot of that, it's like, wow, I do not envy that at all.
For sure. Yeah, it's a little bit like I've been, engaged in a bunch of music production recently, and it's like you said, the amount of music that I actually played during the creation of all of this music is less than 10% of what actually happened.
Yeah.
Like all 95% of it was everything but the music. When it comes to distribution or promotion or all the rest of the shit that like
And then
editing
imagine
and
having to do that constantly, right? Like if you
right.
scaled that up to where that was like a full-time thing, that would drive any normal person insane. And I don't know anyone who does it on their own. Like all the people I know that are in, bands and whatever, even like the guys I know in Nashville that like run studios, it's a team effort.
Sure.
Like there's no one person who can handle all that. So I don't know why there's just this constant pressure we get to constantly have, a gajillion streams and whatever. And it's like if you're and that's the realistic fact of it. And this is part of that video I've been working on is like if you make really interesting dub or something, right? Like I love that stuff. I really do. You're probably not paying your bills with that anytime soon, right? Like and same thing with a lot of the music I write, if I was to put out all the cues I write and all the little like sound beds and scores and things I license out and write all the time, I'm not paying my bills with that. Absolutely not going to happen. So you have to look at like, if you want to get into music as a career, there's so many other ways to do it. And you can't put that pressure on yourself to only have it through the music. Because even then, like most of the people I know that do music also have like another side thing that they do. They license their music out or they teach on the side or they make sample packs, or they are a session musician. That's really popular among my people that are like full-time musicians. Most of their work is going in and playing on other artists' songs because the other artist is like dreaming big and, gonna go do it. But I think that's the thing is, if you're in a gold rush, you sell shovels.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I think that's, it's a very cynical way of looking at it, but it's like, that is the music business. It's more profitable to be the guy that runs a studio, bringing everyone into town who's going to go strike it out big than it is to be the artist coming in, paying a fortune to record with that studio to go strike it out big. And I think that's the part about the music industry that just makes me sick is just the idea of like selling the dream. And I hate it so much. And that's really why I got away from like a lot of the plugins and gear videos and stuff is like after my channel scaled to a certain point, you're just this cog in the machine. And I hated it. Which funny enough, that was actually right around the time of my Saturn return, believe it or not, where I just like, I knew I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing it. And I wasn't unhappy with it, but it's like I just felt like I had done everything I had to say. And still, it's like, when the new whatever comes out, I'm just as much of a gear nerd as everyone else, and I want to check it out. But if I make a video on it now, I'm just a corporate shill. But then I've also made 1,000 videos on all this stuff before. So it's like, if I have to make another video talking about a low pass filter, I am going to lose my mind. So I had, I was just like, there's got to be something more interesting and more valuable out there that I can do and talk about. And there's got to be something that's more fulfilling for me to talk about. Because, like if I make a video on the new whatever pedal, there's another one that comes out next week. And me and 100 other YouTube people are going to get one. It's like, what's the point? What am I doing here? I don't enjoy it. Like I enjoy, reading manuals and playing with things, but just like, God, that's exhausting after a while. And it's just, it doesn't feel like it's valuable, because it's like, if you watch my video or someone else's video, it's replaceable. It's same thing, same person covering the same product with the same features, the same presets, the same price point, and, doing very much the same demo because you got to get it out on release day if you want to hit that algorithm, bruh. So, it was just like, what am I doing with my life here? Like I've done everything I could conceivably want to do on this end of like the YouTube spectrum. And same like musically, just tutorial wise. I mean, God, do we really need another tutorial on like compressing drums? Do we really need that video? You know what I
Sure.
mean? And like, it sounds super pretentious and all, but it was just like, there's so many people doing that, and a lot of them are better at doing it than I will be. So why am I kidding myself trying to be the next, like, whatever? You know, I'm not going to be Guy Mitchell Moore. I'm not going to be like Sadowik. I'm not going to be Seamless R. So what am I wasting my time making these videos for? Like, sure,
Mhm.
they're interesting. Sure, they can add value, but just like, so what? You know, like if you want to learn about compression, Google it. There's a billion things out there about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, so this whole discussion kind of begs the question, how important do you think algorithmic legibility is? So
If you want
this
to be
is
like
something.
traditionally successful, it's very important.
Mhm.
And I think it's just become more important over time. Like, you know, if you want to start a TikTok account,
Mhm.
okay, what
I
can
have
we
one of
do?
those.
Yeah, so we could talk about music. We could certainly do that. There's probably 1,000 billion other accounts doing that, but you could do it too. Okay, so what's your twist on it? I don't know. Uh, I'm really good at piano. Okay, so you're going to be a piano TikTok account. Okay, now you make a video. What is it about? Oh, here's a cool blues lick on piano. That's been done to death a billion times. Okay, so what are we going to do that hits different in the algorithm? Well, if we're just a musician promoting ourselves and showing off our skills, we're just peacocking constantly, and that's exhausting, and it just comes across as like shilling and self promotion. Okay, what's an interesting twist here that the algorithm likes? Oh, I see a lot of dogs. Okay, I'll have my dog explain piano on TikTok. There you go. That's a great
Mhm.
account.
Mhm.
You know, animals, funny things, little skits, fluffy information, done. Dog
Mhm.
teaches piano, amazing TikTok account. Why? It should perform well in the algorithm. It's something that people identify with. It's something that cross promotes a little bit in that there are people who are interested in piano and there are people who are interested in dogs and funny videos. Cool.
Mhm.
So now we can get sponsorships from gear companies. We could get sponsorships from Chewy, da 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 da. And that's how you scale an idea.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
But if you're just someone who is extremely passionate about piano stuff, go make that account. It's not going to survive probably,
Mhm.
but you know, you could certainly do it. So I think there's a lot to be said for understanding how to look at something more like a business. Like if I'm going to start releasing music and I really want it to be a full-time career, what are the things that are going to make that happen? It's
Mhm.
probably not writing obscure jazz drum solos that are 14 minutes long. That's
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
really a great way to build a music career,
Sure.
you know? And I think there is always a thing of like quality floats to the top, but that top is a very relative ceiling. You know,
Tell me more.
being the best bouzouki player in the world,
Mhm.
not like, not something
Sure.
that's probably super sustainable. Whereas
Big
being
fish, small
like,
pond.
yeah, you know, so it's like, and that was part of what I thought with my YouTube channel as well, was like when I looked at what I was doing and kind of who my peers were and whatever, it was just like, okay, this is kind of it. Like there is no going past this threshold because out of all the people on YouTube, only so many care about music. And out of all those people, only so many care about making music. And out of all
Mhm.
those people, only so many care about buying gear, you know, actually putting money on the table to pay for a plugin or a piece of equipment. And out of
Mhm.
all those people, only so many really care about using music production technology and equipment to produce this specific genre.
Mhm.
And out
Mhm.
of those people, only so many care about doing it with this one plugin. And out of those people, only so many care about this one plugin and this one application for this one genre of this one idea of music. And out of all
Mhm.
those people, only so many are willing to actually support your channel and grow. So when you look
Sure.
at like most of, you know, the broad scope of music YouTube, I think, you know, Andrew Wong and Adam Neely and like, you know, Pianote and some of those other channels notwithstanding, I think those, I would consider those outliers. But in all of music YouTube, the ceiling is like what, 100,000, 150,000 subscribers or so. There aren't really
Sure.
many channels that go beyond that. So that was kind
Mhm.
of my thing, was just like, I've done this and I feel like I am now the best bouzouki player in the world. Like I wasn't the best, I'm still not the best
Mhm.
channel by any means, but like I feel like I was doing the best thing I could do within that space, if that makes sense. Like I just felt like I had hit my limit of like what I could do with my format.
And so are you in a place now where you're like trying to evolve that format? You're trying
Pretty
to
much,
move
yeah.
in a
So it
different
was that
direction?
whole thing, and it was just funny that it happened to coincide with like the whole Saturn return period where I was like, okay, so what could I like if I could make any video, what
Mhm.
would I do?
Mhm.
So it just became like, I just want to talk about shit that like no one else
Sure.
is talking about, and I don't know why, because this is all stuff that we deal with. And I think that
Mhm.
this is stuff that's so much more interesting and so much more useful and just
Mm.
so much more applicable to like everybody. Because after a
Mhm.
while, I started integrating some of those ideas into my content where I was, I would do a music theory video, but I was kind of talking about the broad strokes of like the concept of why we would do this and how do we implement this to change the feeling and like what does that mean that we're doing that and that kind of stuff. And I would get comments every once in a while like, oh, I'm a painter, but what you're saying, it applies a lot to what I do. Or like, oh, I'm a writer, I happen to like make music on the side, but I'm a writer, and it's weird, a lot of this is the same way I think of my writing process. And that
Mm.
was kind of the stuff that got me thinking like there is just this whole other side of this picture I'm not looking at.
Hmm.
So it became
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
widening out the scope a little bit to get into a different space where I felt like I could challenge myself more. Cause then with Gear Tube and Plug-in Tube and all that, there's like In the Mix, there's Ricky Tinez, there's Bo Beats, there's Loop Op, there's, everyone else, Red Means Recording, Ben Jordan. And Ben kind of did a similar trajectory too, I think, where he just sort of left music YouTube.
Mhm.
But
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, it was just like, looking at Ricky and Bo and Tatro and Sanjay C and whoever, it was like, I'm never going to be as good at this as they are.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, it was like, why am I kidding myself here? What am I doing? And why would you
Mm.
come to my channel against all these other channels? Because like, they're better at this than I am. They're more interesting at this than I am. And they do a better job of presenting this than I do. So I could
Mhm.
try and improve on that, but it's like, it's just not where my heart is with it. Because then
Mhm.
again, it kind of like I said earlier, then I'm just sort of imitating and not iterating. And I think there's value in imitation to a degree, but like it just, I don't know, it only goes so far. And again, it just came down to that, like, I have to enjoy the process. And it just
Mm.
really got to this point where it's like, I don't want to talk about gear or plugins all day because that's my job. Like this is what I
Sure.
do all day. So the last thing I want to do when I have to sit down and make a video is talk about another guitar pedal or another synth or another plugin. Like I don't care.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that
Mhm.
was kind of the split off for me was like, okay, I've hit that ceiling. What's the next move? And then
Sure. And
became more challenging. Yeah, just to be like, what can I do that makes this even bigger? And I'm sure I'm going to hit that next ceiling at some
mm.
point, but I don't feel like I'm quite there yet, at least.
Sure, sure. So that's interesting. You said, "What can I do to make this even bigger?" So now, do you continue to be concerned with algorithmic legibility now that you are sort of like moving away from music as a niche, as a sort of restriction
Right.
point, and moving into, I don't know, like philosophy or self-help space or this kind
Yeah,
of
that's the
thing?
thing is like I don't really know what I'm doing, but that's why I enjoy it so much now. Is like I still can't really put a pin on what I'm after exactly, but that's way more fun, right? But yeah, I
Sure.
think there is definitely a part of it of like algorithmic legibility just because like YouTube is now part of my job. So it's like,
Hmm.
when people are, "Oh, you're just in it for the views." I'm like, "Well, duh. I run a fucking YouTube channel. Like, what do you think? Yeah, I do this for views. That's why I'm doing it."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
oh, da 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 da, clickbait, something. This is stupid. This channel used to be about music and that kind of stuff. And it's funny because it's like, well, you can't get a million views if you don't get in front of a million people.
Sure.
That's just a fact. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that like there's somewhere else to go with this. And part of it is just a competition with myself. It's not really that like I get this fulfillment from hitting such and such subscribers because like after after you get your 100,000 plaque or whatever, it's like it all just becomes sort of meaningless.
Sure.
Where it's like you get 110,000 subscribers and you're like, wow, yay.
Sure.
And then you hit 180 and you're like, yeah, 200 and 200,000. You're kind of like, oh, cool, I doubled that. But it's not as big of a deal anymore because it's like
Mm-hmm.
in knowing that like that stupid YouTube plaque I have, that's something that very few people have. Like in the grand scheme of things, I have something in my hands that is extraordinarily hard to obtain. And like with my channel alone, I've achieved something very few people will ever achieve. But now it's just something that sits over there and collects dust, and I have to hit it with Windex like once a month. So it's like, it doesn't mean anything. So there's this thing between the like making sure things will work in the algorithm for the sake of making sure the content is worth producing to like get it out to enough people and whatever. And I think part of it is also like, for me, it's the challenge of like, how do I take this idea and turn it into something that's going to like hit with people? And what is the right title and thumbnail to sum this up? And what is the right approach to this concept? Because I've got like, ideas that come in my head, and it became a shift of like, okay, I have an idea for a video. I think that's the initial start to a YouTube channel for everybody. I have an idea to make a video about. But eventually it became, okay, I have an idea. Is this a good idea for a YouTube video of just what YouTube is as like a creative medium? Does this work for the platform? And then anymore, it really became, okay, I have an idea for a video. Does it make a good YouTube video? Sure. But does it make a Venus Theory video? And that's kind of where I'm at anymore a lot of the time, is like, of course, I want things to do well in the algorithm because I want them to be seen. That's why we do a lot of these things. It's why we make music. We want to share it with other people. But kind of with where I'm at, it makes sense that if I'm spending 9 days of my life on something, it has to be viable. But it's also in that challenge of like, how do I take this concept or this thing I've been floating about in my head and turn it into a Venus Theory video? Like, what makes that into my thing? So it's a balance between those things of like the challenge to myself and the challenge to make sure it's going to work on YouTube. Just because I think that's kind of where I want to go anymore. Like I don't want a music career. I don't care. I've done that. It sucked. Don't want to do it again.
Sure.
So, for me,
so
it's like
you
I'm
want
happy
a YouTube
making...
career now.
I don't know. I mean, I just kind of like what I'm doing with, I like scoring, I like sound design, I like doing that stuff, and I really like making videos, because for me, making videos is like the coalescence of everything. I love writing, I love researching, I love shooting and editing videos, I love color grading, I love cinematography, I love writing music. Like I fucking love music so much. And now I can write my own music that goes in my own videos. So for me, YouTube is kind of where I want to go, in that it's the only thing I do anymore that makes me happy, like that truly fulfills every aspect of the creative process for me.
That's what's up.
And like, I love writing music, and I obviously want to continue to do that, but I love writing it more when I'm like scoring something or working on a bigger project. I love that collaborative piece to it, where it's like, because I'm working on a video game project, which isn't due out for like 4 years. It's so funny to work in like the game world. The timelines are insane. But like, yeah, I mean, imagine writing songs. Right, imagine writing songs for 4 years. Like, it's ridiculous. But big games and stuff, it takes a long time to make. Like, it's crazy. But it's so cool because it kind of runs back into like that VR idea, where like the music is just part of the overall picture. And I think that that's more interesting to me, is like, if I have to write music and I have to write it for something, there's so many more interesting like questions and ideas that come up there of like, what sonically sums up like this character and this world, and what is like the tone palette for this level, and why should it be these types of textures, and how do these layers like interact? If the character's doing this and then they're in combat, how does that change? Where does that go? And I love it because the music is so much more dynamic. You're working in these sections where you have like combat section A and like variations on it or whatever, and there's like a death sound. Like if you lose the battle, there's like a little cue that comes up. But if you win, then there's like the ba-ba-da-da, a different cue comes up. But depending on like the level, or depending on the enemy type, you might have a different theme, or like a different kind of iteration on that combat theme idea. like the drums stay the same, but like the melodic elements are different. Or the ambient music, like just walking around, exploring the world, picking the magic fruit or whatever you do in the game. What does that sound like and why? And how does it evolve? Because you can create these like 16 bar patterns, and then in the game engine, it can choose between them based on the player choice and what's happening. So it's music, but it's not fixed. And that, again, it's just so much more interesting to me.
Sure.
Whereas, like, you know, I've been working on an album in the background for a while now, and I'm just kind of at a point of like, do I even bother releasing this? Like, does anyone care? I don't think they do. So, like, why not just do something else? And something that's more interesting to me.
Sure. So you said something there that seems really interesting to me, and it's sort of like about this integration, this integration of like taking these disparate things, taking the video and taking the music and taking the color grading and making sure that everything is sort of like reflective of all the one, and like making a cohesive unit there. And that's something that I have spent a lot of time doing with like astrology and music and this kind of thing, and I make video content as well. And one thing that I've run into all the time that has been super annoying is that, so I put my original music with this video content, and it's been super interesting to like sort of, usually there's like an end point, there's a place where the music should stop, because I've only got so much music or something like that, and that end point is going to sort of like act as punctuation. And so I'm going to put that at the end of somebody, I use it as an exclamation point. You know, somebody has said something super dope on the podcast, and it's like, there it is, there's your spot, right?
Right, yeah,
and
music
then
drops out, yeah.
Exactly. And so then before that, I sort of let the music decide what the important stuff is, and it brings stuff out. Like when stuff happens in the music, then it sort of changes the feeling of whatever is being said in that moment.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
It's something that's really, really interesting, because I made this music, like I made Can't Help Myself, for example. I made that, you know, years ago, or I wrote it years ago, and then finally like finished it about a year ago now, and this kind of thing, right? So it's this static product. We talked about that a little earlier, but then I put it in there as punctuation, and then it adds so much to what is being said in that moment. And I think it's like really interesting to sort of like let the music be an entity that makes these decisions about what's important, about what people are saying. And I find it to be really, really effective. Like the music makes great choices about what's important in that statement. But one thing that I found here that is very annoying is YouTube Content ID recognizes my music and thinks that I don't own it. And so,
I was in a battle with YouTube for like a year and a half because Venus Theory kept claiming my content.
Exactly.
And it drove me insane, because then, like, because with the appeal process, when you appeal it, it goes to the claimant. In this case, the claimant is also me somehow.
Right.
So it wouldn't go back to me, because then, you know, that breaks the system. So I don't know how many emails I had to send to YouTube of like, I am Venus Theory. Like, see the name on the channel, that guy? I am that guy.
My name is on all of it.
Yeah, and like the only responses I would get from YouTube were just the automated, you know, thanks for messaging us. Here's our content policy. So then I went to like the chat and got a hold of like an actual person. Hi, you know, I keep getting these claims. I am Venus Theory, you know, like, and I'm logged in through my Venus Theory email. Like, this is me, trust me. And they're like, one moment, we'll review this. Da da da. Okay, I think we found the issue. Please review our content copyright, you know, and it just got nowhere. So I don't even remember how it ended up getting solved. I think I just sent like...
I hope you were going to have a solution for me.
No, I think I just ended up sending too many emails, and they just like were like, whatever, just let it go. Because I was emailing them like
they let
once
it rock?
a week. So yeah, eventually all the disputes just got resolved at once, except one. I don't know why. It was one track that just... I don't even remember which one it was, but one of them I still have that issue where Venus Theory has claimed it, and I think... I don't know. I don't know if it was because it got released with a label at some point or something, or like got used somewhere else. I have no idea. And it just kind of came down to it, like, if someone so desperately wants the like $1.38 that this track is gonna make, then like, whatever, you know, go for it. I don't give a shit.
Sure.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but like,
the
so
copyright landscape is bizarre. So that's why in my new videos, because I have been writing original music only for the last couple videos, because I finally just started quitting like client work,
Mhm.
at least the majority of it. So that
Mm.
freed up a lot more time to where I could write music for my videos and stuff. But now every video has like original cues. So I
Oh,
only
sure.
write it for
Specific
that
to
one
that
video.
video.
Yeah. So
Uh-huh.
that's been nice, but obviously that takes a lot more time. And it's not like really full music. It's just more like sound bed
Right.
stuff, like what I
Mhm.
would score in like an actual project. You know, it's just little minimal synth cues or like little boops here or there. Again,
Mhm.
yeah, kind of to act as like punctuation. So that's, I don't know. That's the best way to handle it, at least that I can think of.
That's real big kid stuff right there. You're you're like, you know what? I'm gonna get around that by making a specific piece of music for this event,
Which is
which
really dumb that like that's what it has to come to. But you know,
what else are you
it's one
gonna
of
do?
those things where it's like if you complain about it and all that, what are you going to do about it? Because it's YouTube. Like they're huge. They
Sure.
don't care.
Yeah, and so this kind of gets to the broader question that I have for you here, which is like, what am content creation in the age of robots?
I don't know. It's hard because it's like it's hard to see where a lot of it's going to go. You know, because like there is almost no end game a lot of the time with it because
Tell me more.
it's just bigger numbers over and over, and that's where it goes. You know, if you start doing content creation and whatever, my headphones are dying here. I'll just take them off. Um, yeah, if you start doing content creation, it's just this never-ending hellscape of like needing bigger numbers and more followers and
Hmm.
so on and so on. And I think everything became content creation, and that kind of sucks.
Hmm.
Where like, and I think there was a TikTok meme that really summed it up. Where I don't remember what the like sound is, but it was like, I'm a small business owner, which means I'm now a content creator. Here's the content. And I feel like
Right.
that it's such a dystopian thing, but that sums up so well like where we are with really any like independent venture. You know, if
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
a sculptor,
Right.
you get on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. And if you're a woodworker, you get on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. If you're a musician,
Hmm.
you get
Hmm.
on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, which like it's weird. And I guess that's just, you know, kind of the societal shift of everything, and that's where we're at. But it does suck because I feel like it turns everything into a product. And it
Mm.
makes it really
Hmm.
hard to not think of everything you're doing as like a product that needs marketed and whatever, you know. It used to
Mm.
be like, and I know this is like very much old man yells at clouds, but it's like, you know, musicians used to make music and they
Sure.
would go get on a label or whatever and they would go play the shows and they would sell the CDs and they would get a music video out there. But even now, it's like, I can't remember who it is. I think it was maybe it was Taylor Swift or Haley Williams from Paramore or something. Um, but they were talking about like even on their level now, all the labels want is a viral moment.
Right.
You know, they don't want the next hit record. They don't want the thing that's going to be in the Target commercial. They want the thing
Mhm.
that's going to blow up on TikTok as a sound. And I think, and I feel, and I would maybe have to ask some of my songwriter people about this that just work as like staff songwriters. But I do, like I said, I very much have this agreement with the theory that there is just TikTok pop. And that's where all music ends because music is just a part of a bigger picture. You know, and I don't think the
That's
music
where all
industry
music
is.
ends. Tell me more. So say more about the TikTok as the end of music.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, that's where you make or break it now. And that's fine. That's just the way of the world, you know. That's capitalism at work, I guess. And that's,
What do you mean by end here?
you know, like if you want to make or break yourself as an artist, you have to produce content. You have to get on Instagram, you have to make stuff that goes on TikTok and whatever. And if
Mhm.
you really want to make it work, you need to make stuff that's going to do well on TikTok as like a viral sound, you know, something that's either kitschy and funny and stupid and memey, or something that's really catchy, but just kind of vanilla enough to translate to the mass market, or it has to be something, very showboaty. I feel like that's all the musicians I see on TikTok is just like primarily dudes with guitars for some reason, but it's dudes with guitars like jerking off going and that,
Sure.
that's cool, but where's the record? What are you doing? You're just posting shredding videos.
Sure.
And same
It's
thing,
like
like a
that
lot of the
comic.
there are
There's
these
an old.
like
I'm sorry.
amazing vocalists I've seen on TikTok too, where it's like like a girl in her bedroom with like holding like an SM58 singing like a cover of fucking Olivia Rodrigo or whatever. And it sucks. And it makes me mad because it's like you'll hear these vocalists who are just like, God, they have like just the best voice and they're so good and their delivery is so real. And like you could tell that they have that like gift. This is where they should be in the broad scope of the universe. This is what they should be doing. But the only way that they could do it is to sing a fucking Olivia Rodrigo song. That's the only way they're going to get noticed. So it all becomes the end game of content, baby content, which sucks. But, I think the upside to it is, like I said, there's a lot more fulfillment that can come from that than music. Because I feel like music, at least for what it was a decade ago, is over. I don't think that part of the industry is ever really coming back. Like music end game is Chris Stapleton at the CMAs. It's the viral trending sound. It's that, that's where it goes. And I think that's
So by end game, you mean pinnacle of achievement?
I think that's where it all ends. Yeah. It's like if you hit that level where you get big enough, it all just circles back to we need another viral moment. But I'm hopeful that viral marketing is going to start to take a back seat. I don't know that that's like sustainable as a business model. So
what do you think just spitballing, what do you think would be a next thing, a preferable alternative?
I think it's just the resurgence of like the next era of like the middle class musician. Because, it used to be there was the big bands, they would tour on Ozfest and Warped Tour and whatever. And the middle class bands, they opened for those bands or they played cover gigs every weekend at Joe's Bar down the road. And, you could make a living doing that. You can't do that anymore. So I think that there's going to be the next era. And I think a lot of my fellow YouTube peers are part of that in a way where there's this whole other part of the platform to utilize that's not angled at like super viral marketing and trendy shit. It's people who are very passionate about something sharing what they're passionate about. And sometimes it's not super polished, but that quality just floats up to the top, because a lot of the YouTube channels I watch, and I don't really even watch many like music YouTube channels anymore, but there are a lot of channels I watch where like their editing isn't really great and whatever, but it's just a really good video. And I think that's going to be the next phase of the music industry is people who are fulfilled not only from making music, but from making content, but who utilize it as a way to just spread the word about what they're doing, but it's not their goal. You know what I mean? Like their goal isn't to be a viral TikToker. Their goal is just to be a recognized musician in some capacity or something. And I think that's where it's going to come to is like people sharing ideas and their music. And I think there's going to be more of a demand for that because a lot of the viral marketing stuff and whatever just feels so like hollow and icky. And I think people are kind of getting tired of it. It's like when mom joins Facebook, it ruins it. You know what I mean? And I think that's where we're getting with these things of like, oh, cool. Here's the Neutrogena ad on TikTok and it's got some celebrity in it and it's got this trending meme sound that someone made of a frog screaming and like it just becomes this corporate hellscape. So I think that's where the demand is going to shift for is more like interesting content that's more real, that's not trying too hard.
Yeah, that's
and it's
interesting.
People, like I said, it's people who are fulfilled in the process and not the outcome. I think that's where that's going to shift to. And that's kind of why I did my own shift, and I'm hoping that that's going to work out.
Sure. Is there a hallmark for what it looks like when people are fulfilled by the process rather than the outcome?
I think it's just I don't know. It's one of those kind of almost imperceptible things where you could tell someone's happy when they're doing something.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's just it's in that very real like smile they give when they're doing something or whatever. Just the way that they, whatever it is, like when you meet someone who's super passionate about like apple trees and they'll just like talk your ear off about apple trees, you know that they're not bullshitting you.
Mm.
And I think
Hmm.
that's the give with a lot of that is, when you watch something and you can tell someone is actually being genuine and not just doing something to make it as big as possible. Like, of
Hmm.
course, they want to grow it bigger. Everybody does. That's natural, but you could tell that they're not in it just to be at the top.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think again, it's that process of iteration. I want to be the best version of what I do.
Word up. Okay. All right. Well, I do want to be cognizant. I know of the time here. I know everybody is super busy and got a
There's content
thousand
to be
things to
made,
do.
damn it.
There's content to create. The wheel grinds on. But before we leave, I wonder, would you be comfortable telling the folks what your sun, moon, and rising are?
Sun, moon, and rising. I'd have to look it up again really quick. I know I'm
I
like the
imagine you
most
have Saturn in Aquarius, right?
I know I am the most Scorpio of Scorpios.
Right.
Uh
Okay. I find this super interesting. I found that a lot of Scorpios are have a penchant for music. I also have the sun in Scorpio. I've known a bunch of super dope drummers who
and I
have
think
the
though
sun in
it's always out
Scorpio.
of anger. All the Scorpios I know who are into music were always like the most spiteful people. And I think I very much fall into that category myself of like I remember as a
Sure.
kid, oh, music's for girls, that kind of thing. Or then, like when I
They
was
told you music was for girls,
oh
really?
yeah, I mean I grew up in like small redneck hell. So like the arts were for women.
Oh
So
man, I always thought that music was a way to get girls.
oh yeah, I was told that too. That was a lie.
Oh really?
Then
That was a lie.
you
Oh
you
man,
join the band, you're the guitar player and whatever, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna get chicks, man. No, you're just surrounded by a bunch of sweaty dudes at a metal show.
Sure.
Okay, God, when was I born? I can't remember. I think it was like
It
this.
doesn't matter. You ain't got to do all that. I just wondered because you're showing up with all of this amazing Saturn stuff. You've just been talking about Saturn this whole time,
Oh,
and I'm so interested in. I feel like you got to have Saturn in Aquarius because you told me when your Saturn return happened
I'm
based
trying
on
to
your
look up
YouTube channel.
the.
And Saturn square Uranus is a big deal there. And you keep talking about all of the Saturn Uranus things. It's so very interesting. You're doing a great job.
There we go.
Oh, cafe astrology. I hate their drawing style. So what do we
Yeah,
got here?
it's awful.
Scorpio rising, Sun in Scorpio rising, Mars in Scorpio rising. Like love that. Mars conjunct Pluto on the rising. Venus in Libra, Jupiter in Libra also. Where's Saturn? In Aquarius, of course. Saturn is in
Hmm.
Aquarius with the moon in Aries. Looks like applying to a sextile to Saturn. No, that's Black Moon Lilith. Moon in Gemini. Moon in Gemini. Oh, trine. Look at that. Look at that. Gorgeous.
It's like hardcore Scorpio.
Sort of. It's not all Scorpio stuff here. We've got super hardcore Scorpio stuff with Mars and Pluto and Mercury and the Sun all in Scorpio in the rising sign. So definitely that. But it's not all that because you've also got the moon in Gemini making a grand trine with Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter and Venus in Libra, and all of that's in rulership. So like, there's a bunch of. It's not just about the Scorpio stuff wants to come through. There's like a strong, I don't know, brutally honest thing that can show up there. I also have Mercury in Scorpio, and that's a thing that I run into a lot. Is like I'll tell people exactly what I mean, and people will be like, "Oh no, I can't believe you said that to me." This kind of thing will show up. But you've got that Venus and Libra there with Jupiter. There's something like diplomatic to that. Like I noticed that, like, one, and this is something that is probably true about all the people who have algorithmic success, who like show up on the things and are able to get that kind of success. There's a kind of diplomacy to that. There's a kind of ability to say the thing without swearing, for example. I've seen,
Right.
you know, a lot of people blurring their swear words and this kind of stuff.
Well, and you got to play
which
the
I don't
game.
do on this channel, but
Yeah,
say again.
you gotta play the game to some degree, and that's just the way of the world. But I think there's always been a very strong like business sense in the back of my mind.
Big time, big time. You know, Libra is with the scales, and the scales are originally a tool for verifying fairness and verifying like, is this thing valuable to you? Is you know, how are we going to decide how much stuff we're going to weigh up this kind of like,
And I think it's also the thing that sort of
value.
keeps me in check of like looking and you know, having the end result in front of me and being able to say like, is this the best I can actually do?
Yeah, big time, big time. And Venus and Libra is very good at that kind of thing. This kind of like, you know, I think about Venus and Libra as being very elegant and knowing how to deal with etiquette. Like what's gonna work here, like the feng shui of a
Yeah.
room or
The
a
aesthetics,
soundscape
bro.
or this kind of thing. Say again?
The aesthetics.
The aesthetic, yeah, big time. And Jupiter's right there also saying yes to that, confirming all that, you know, and that is working with in a trine with Saturn. So you've got this super strong Saturn, which is square to all your Scorpio stuff, right? So that's going to show up big time. We've got Mars in Scorpio on and ruling the rising square to Saturn in Aquarius. So that Saturn is going to show up big time in the first house ascendant, who I am as a person stuff, which obviously all of your videos are these grays and you wear a black shirt all the time and you're hella cynical and all of these kinds of things. You keep talking about here's why you're not going to make it in the music industry and here's why limits
Life
are
is a lie
important
and everything means nothing. The end. Go home.
all of that. Well, I don't think it's the end necessarily. I feel like you've come off maybe a little more cynical in this interview than I feel like your YouTube content tends to be.
I try to
Typically
present
the
things with
YouTube
an
content.
upswing. That's always my goal. Is like if I'm gonna pick this apart, it has to have an uptake on it.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I do frequently find myself inspired at the end of your videos while at
And
the
that's the
same
point.
time.
Well, that's the thing. Is like that's why I make them. It is funny because people are always like, "Oh, you're just in it for the money and in it for the views," and it's like literally, it's the end of every video. I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome. That's all I want. If you agree with me and you think what I said is awesome, great. If you think I'm an idiot and you can do better, awesome. I'm fine with that
Right.
too. As long as you
sure.
go do something, that's what I want. That's why I make these videos. Is like that was always the thing for me, was like I want to make the videos I wish I had. And at first it was like the sound design stuff, right? You know, no one was teaching this stuff the way I understood it, so I was like, I'll make videos on it. And then gear. Oh,
Mm.
I don't like the way people make gear videos. I'm going to do them my sort of way. But then, you know, that just, and as the channel scaled, that just started to suck because there's this whole slimy side to that side of the industry. And I was just over
Sure.
it. So then it was just like, okay, you know, kind of like I said, it got to that point, especially with the Saturn return, which was like just, you know, a year or so ago or whatever. Now it was like, what am
Still
I
on
doing
right now, Playboy?
And it was just like, what am I doing and where is it going? And what is the video I wish I had right now? Because that's the thing, is we all have these conversations, you know, with our friends and whatever, right? Or on Discord or whoever. We always talk about, God, dude, my song isn't getting any plays, or like, oh, this mix just sucks, or like this client just fired me. Like, what do I do? And we have these conversations like in the dark. So to me, it was just like, wouldn't it be more valuable just to like get it out there?
Word.
You
Well,
know?
as someone who is a content creator and a musician and someone who has a YouTube channel and someone who is trying to finish products and all of that sort of stuff, and someone who is engaging with this idea of algorithmic success and these ideas of like, how do we want to make all of the stuff work together, and what does it mean for
Right.
me to be an individual in this machine dominated landscape? It's been really helpful to me to see your videos and learn what kind of things are you're thinking about. And it's true that I do disagree with you very frequently, but at the end of it, I am ultimately inspired to make something awesome.
Exactly. And that's fine.
I super appreciate that about you. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, for agreeing to take
Thanks for having me.
Take time out of your day to hang out with me and discuss some of these wilder thoughts that we have out here in the world. If you want to tell the ZamboniFunk listeners, where can they find you? How the folks who are interested in your thing, how do we get to you?
Venus Theory on YouTube, and I think all my music's on Bandcamp because I've just started deleting my music elsewhere because I don't care anymore.
Sure.
I think it's on Spotify too. I have Spotify and Bandcamp and probably the other major outlets. Whatever DistroKid puts you on, my music's there.
That's what's up. All right, cool. So the folks can check out Venus Theory on, it seems like YouTube is probably going to be where your next video that you've been talking about up to this point is.
The next couple ones are, yeah. I write 3, film 3, edit 3. So I always work in batches.
Oh, that's what's up.
And I've got my next, I think like 15 videos are planned. So
Damn.
a lot of stuff on the barrel here. Yeah, it's a lot.
Word. I got to get my planning game together. I don't know what I'm going to do.
That's actually one of the
video.
videos I have, believe it or not, is like here's my like productivity outline. Like this is how I get stuff done.
Woo. All right. Well, I can't wait for that video to come out. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to the people for joining us and hanging out with us and sending this video to a friend. And thank you for just being here, vibing. Put a little comment in the bottom and tell us why we are whack. I appreciate all of the discourse that has come. I really appreciate the ZamboniFunk family, all of y'all, because I very rarely get dumb comments in the comment section. Every time somebody disagrees, then it's usually something that is useful or interesting. The only type of people that are dumb about it are the people who think that astrology isn't real and came to troll about that. But apart from that, the folks who comment are beautiful, and thank you all for doing that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for sending me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. Thank you for getting on my Patreon. Thank you for getting on the Venus Theory Patreon. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everyone who made this possible. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing y'all next time. Bye. You already know. Thank you, sir.
Well, cool. That was fun, man.